So what habit changed your life?
So fitness and the leader's hour.
So what book has influenced your thinking the most?
I mentioned Humilitas by John Dixon.
So what's one thing leaders should stop doing immediately?
Thinking that being the boss is a privilege rather than a responsibility.
Welcome to I'm Up, He Sees Me, I'm Down. Conversations on leadership, faith, and resilience with Mike Turner. This show is proudly sponsored by Alamo Tech and Mission Solution Partners.
Welcome to another episode of I'm Up, He Sees Me, I'm Down. Today I'm here with Andy Neillie. He's a leadership expert, keynote speaker, and business owner who helps organizations turn managers into high-performing leaders. With over 20 years of experience leading teams, building multi-million-dollar businesses, and training leaders across Fortune 500 companies, Andy brings both real-world execution and deep insight into what leadership actually requires. But what makes his story stand out is how personal it is. From being shaped by poor leadership early in his career to drawing powerful leadership lessons from rescued dogs, Andy works and grounded in empathy, character, and service. Andy, welcome to the show.
Excited to be on with you, Mike. Looking forward to a spirited conversation for the next period of time.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that we just had so many connections, and when we were having our first conversation, everything was just like, oh yeah. And some of them will appear on this show from time to time, I'm sure, because we'll grab them.
The only thing I need to correct you right up front, I think
Okay.
Your second sentence said I was a leadership expert. One, I'm no expert. And two, I'm not sure anybody ever gets a leadership expert. You're always in process, I think.
Oh, I love that because, a lot of times, and that's kind of a little turn I always go through too, is someone tells me they're an expert, I start to question their expertise almost right away because I go, if you're really an expert, you would say you're not an expert.
Yeah, you don't need to say
so,
it.
Yeah, you don't need to say it. You already know what the pitfalls are because of your expertise. But good. Yeah. So that's already telling me a lot about you. All right. So for the audience, let's just kind of dive in a little bit because I'd really love them to hear your early life and background and just kind of start there. And let's just see how that kind of molds out.
Sure. Well, and when you and I talked a few days ago about this, my leadership kind of passion, at least, not expertise, but right. I'd like to think I'm at least a student of people that are good leaders. It really developed down two paths, Mike. One of them was I became a follower of Christ at a very young age. I don't come from a church family at all, but I had a young friend in elementary school that invited me to a Christian camping program, and at a camp in upstate Michigan when I was a young child, Christ found me and I became a follower of his. And so I'm reading the Gospels about this wonderful servant leader as I'm growing in my faith and growing into my young adulthood. And then I'm going to work, and it wasn't even like career decisions. This was like jobs I had to get through college. And one right. of them was with a construction crew. And my crew had a boss who had an anger management issue. And if you were within 6 feet of him, when he had a power tool and he lost it, you just better run for cover. And I'm reading about this servant leader who lays down his life for the people he's trying to influence and bring to a better state. And then I'm working for a boss who can't get over himself and has anger management issues. And I thought, this is not the way it's supposed to be. And that began to awaken in me this really just this passion around nobody should work for a bad boss. Nobody should work for a bad boss. And that was really kind of the start of the journey.
The catalyst. And and it's interesting about that too, that I when I hear that, I start to think, and this is what I struggle with in my kind of early walk with Christ, was just the understanding of what is the Bible trying to tell me? What is that story trying to tell me? And how do I correlate that to a angry boss? Like I get it. Like it's really hard sometimes because you're like, I'm not a slave trying to, right. get out of, what I'm saying? It's wow. Yeah. It's like, how do you do that?
And, you and I both know Jesus was not this meek and mild wimp. He got angry, but he didn't get angry about himself. He got angry when he saw injustices happening, when he saw people in power using their power inappropriately, when he saw the downtrodden being overlooked.
Yeah.
My boss just made it all about him. And he wasn't the only one, right? Later on, early in my corporate career, I worked for a boss who took credit for no matter what his team did, he made himself look good. I was one of his team members, and we just knew David was going to make sure that he won. He was the one that looked good. And once again, that's just not the model of leadership that people flourish under. And so I think, all of us probably have in our history stories of people that we worked for that they weren't who they needed to be. And as a result, it impacted their ability to lead well.
Yeah. And so ultimately it kind of comes down to leading with love, leading with empathy, leading with care, those kind of things.
Yeah.
So,
and you and I both know, because we've both been in the marketplace, we both have worked in environments where leading with love doesn't mean I let people get away with everything. They're still accountable, right? There's still KPIs that have to be kept. There's quotas that have to be earned. There's projects that need to be completed, whatever it is. Leading with love is not an easy, let's just sing Kumbaya. It is pushing people to perform as you practice stewardship and servant leadership.
Yeah, the mentorship, the stewardship, like that is the key aspect of it. That comes out in the heart, and it just really resonates in your leadership style.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that you're a pushover or that you're a weak leader. The contrary to all that, honestly.
Exactly. There was somebody on LinkedIn, I think a few years ago, that he was crying as he was sharing with us. He had to lay off a significant portion of his workforce. And on the one hand, while I really appreciated his empathy, on the other hand, the rest of his team, they weren't going to be able to come to work if he didn't make the hard decision. A quarter from now, 6 months from now, a year from now, that business would be out of business if he didn't make a hard decision to rift some people. So that's that tension of how do I balance caring for my people and caring for the stewardship responsibilities that I have.
And no one here is saying that that's an easy job.
No
one's saying being an owner of a company is easy and making those hard decisions is easy.
That's right.
But I really do feel like if you lead with the right intentions, right? Not, I got to let this guy go because technically I can make another 20,000 and that 20,000 can turn into, my vacation in Hawaii.
No.
Right.
Right.
So as long as it all kind of comes out like that, I think that makes a big difference.
I let somebody go recently on one of the small businesses my wife and I owned, and it didn't go well. And my wife was asking me about it afterwards. And I said, honey, the reason it didn't go well is I should have made this decision 10 years ago. Yeah. And I let somebody continue to get away with the type of behavior that I wanted to say was unacceptable. And yet I let them continue to get away with it. And the reason it didn't go well at the end is because I didn't do the right thing 10 years earlier, probably. Right. So,
yeah.
Man,
so many business owners are in that situation too. They got, a guy that's worked there forever and maybe he has some institutional knowledge and stuff, and that's okay. But if that behavior doesn't align with your culture, that is, that's a rotten apple
exactly.
sitting in the pile of apples.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's talk through your career journey. So you got this boss, he's, early on, he's what we would consider on the spectrum of bad bosses, right? Say at least. There's a couple probably incidences that you had. What started shaping your career journey? How did that start to really unfold to say, this is a bad boss. I know what I don't like in bosses. Now what do I need to start doing to learn what I like in bosses?
You asked me kind of an uncomfortable question because it presumes that I was strategic about a career journey. And Mike, I really wasn't. People have been telling me since I was, in seventh grade that I've got a way with words. I'm a good communicator. And so any number of positions I was in, I ended up being kind of the spokesperson or the one that would speak up or the one that would do the writing or the one that would capture the idea. So I have an ability to communicate well, and I really am passionate about people who are in positions of influence, how to use their influence better. And so not overly necessarily strategically, but those started to come together more than 20 years ago now, where I began to have a platform for using my communication ability, my spoken word, my written word, my keynotes, and my blogs and things like that is what we call them today, to really talk about leadership and become a student of good leaders. And the companies I was working with, I'm looking at good leaders along the way, and I'm interviewing the people that I love to work for them. I was privileged to work on my dissertation focused on the personal side of leading well. So all of this kind of came together to give me this platform where really my best day is when I get to work, whether it's in a marketplace business, a trade association, or even in the Christian environment of men's retreats and things like that, of people that are in positions of influence, recognizing we've got a model of servant leadership. How do we line up our lives to imitate that model? So not strategic, but been doing it for more than 20 years now.
Well, it's funny because in a lot of ways, when you're 20 years down the road and you turn back, look over your shoulder and you go, wow, that is the most strategic approach to my life that I could have ever had. Like, God has put tools along the way that I picked up and learned from.
Yeah.
It reminds me of this. There's a powerful thread in your story, this idea that bad leadership leaves scars, but it can also create purpose. So I love that, and I'd love you to speak on that.
Well, I may steal that from you in subsequent podcasts when people are interviewing me, because it did create purpose, right? And I recognize I do have an ability to communicate, and therefore I want to use my platform well about husbands. How do you love your wives better? Wives, how do you love your kids better? Husbands and family leaders, how do you create environments of grace and truth? And bosses, how do you do that? And team leads, how do you do that? And so it might not have been strategic, but my passion gave me a platform. I guess that's what you were saying, and I would echo that. And so part of my responsibility is say, yes, I'll take that assignment. Yeah, I'll bring that. I'll deliver that keynote. Yes, I'll speak at that men's retreat, because I am passionate. I've been thinking about this for a long time. I've done biblical research. I've done a lot of marketplace research. I've learned a whole bunch of lessons from my rescued pets that we've rescued about meeting them where they're at, and learning to proactively say yes instead of reactively say no, and living in the moment. And so these lessons, when I have a platform to communicate these lessons, that's what I think I'm supposed to do.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And just like this podcast, when we get to this platform and we're able to put something in front of somebody, we want to put a message in front of them that says something that helps them in their life, because ultimately that's what we're trying to do here.
Yeah. So your listeners, Mike, I mean, they need to know you are purposeful about finding folks like me that share some similar passions to you, so we can kind of elevate the conversation on these podcasts.
Oh, absolutely. And I appreciate you saying that, because that's absolutely what I'm trying to do. Like, there's lots of people that come on attempt to come on a podcast, and they just don't align with what we're trying to accomplish here. Yeah. So that's a great segue into my next kind of discussion point that I'd like to talk about. So you've got a strong faith foundation, but you also operate heavily in the corporate world. So how do those two intersect?
Well, first of all, I recognize I work primarily in the marketplace, and I don't get to proselytize. I don't get to leave four spiritual law tracks inside the books. My people, the people that attend my keynote might purchase at the back of the room. But there is a moral underpinning to effective leadership that everybody recognizes. And really, I think it's kind of that God-shaped hole inside all of us, where the celebrity influencers of the 2020s, all of us know, while we're captivated by their shorts on YouTube or Instagram, all of us know that's not real. All of us, when we look inside, we know that's not real. And so when I can just talk about the moral underpinnings of leaderships, fair-minded, other-oriented, self-sacrificial, these character traits, nobody argues about these character traits, even though they may not be people of faith. There's that core sense that, we're all supposed to make the world around us a bit better. And so I've been given freedom. I've got 5 million frequent flyer miles from traveling all over the globe, telling these kinds of stories. So it's cross-cultural, it's cross-geographic. People know there's an underpinning to moral leadership.
Yeah. And this goes back to your ability to communicate, because not a lot of people can say, something in corporate terms that resonates exactly to spiritual beliefs and spiritual writing. So, but you obviously been able to successfully do that.
Well, and I laugh about it a little bit. I think the one that's done that very well is John Maxwell, who's kind of a leadership icon. I think the American Management Association says he's written more about leadership than anybody in the history of mankind. He's got this huge platform. I have a similar platform, but it's this tiny little platform, right? And so there are some people that, like the voice of Dr. Andy and want them to come in and work with their management teams or individuals who are growing in their leadership. And for that relatively small slice of the pie, I'm happy to help.
Well, I appreciate that. So I want to take a minute and talk about leadership or lessons you've learned from, I'm going to call this the golden principles of leadership.
Yeah.
And you see what I'm doing there, right?
Sure do.
So
nice segue, Mike. Nice transition.
Yes, because I really do want to hear your insights into this, because you have a way to say it where the dog speaks. So let's talk about a little about that story.
You've talked about strategic versus being in the right place. My wife and I started rescuing dogs 4 years into our marriage. We've been married many years. We've rescued 15 dogs at this point. We typically have 2 dogs in our home at one time. And gosh, close to 20 years ago now, I was working on my doctorate. I was doing research for my dissertation. I'm interviewing clients I'm working with and leaders that have been recommended to me. And then I'm coming home to dogs and I'm realizing, man, these dogs know some things instinctively, or we who are rescuing wounded hearted dogs that are damaged or neglected or something like that. When we learn to love them well, when we learn to treat them well, when we learn to welcome them to our home, some of the very principles that we're trying to figure out how to deal with these dogs are the same types of things I'm reading about and hearing these good leaders. So I was delivering a keynote called the Redford Principle.
Okay.
Trust takes time.
Yeah.
20 years ago. And a publisher and I started talking. He said, "You got any other dog stories?" And I said, "Man, I think I'm learning as much about leadership of my dogs as I am for my dissertation." He said, "That'd be a great book." And he changed the Redford Principle, that was the name of one of the dogs we rescued, to the Golden Principles, as you alluded to, because kind of the golden rule, and it fits. And we mainly rescued golden retrievers. And a year later, the Golden Principles, life and leadership lessons from a rescued dog, came out. And really, it's what you and I talked about the first time we visited, and I alluded to a minute ago. Simple lessons like a proactive yes is always better than a reactive no. And to really lead them, you got to get down to their level. And good leaders live in the future or live in the present, anticipate the future. They don't dwell on the past. That's kind of how dogs operate. And as we got on their page, it helped us become better dog rescuers. And I also realized these are stories that people can resonate with, and it makes sense. It's that moral underpinning. So the Golden Principles came out. It became a little Amazon.com bestseller, which means my wife reminds me regularly, "You still haven't made any money on this book. Why aren't you a Wall Street Journal best-selling author?" So I think the last close to 20 years now, I'm still delivering keynotes around the Golden Principles and the lessons Redford taught us. You asked me, here's a copy of the book. That's
Principles.
Redford came from a horrible puppy mill, abused and neglected environment. And we'd already rescued a number of dogs before we rescued Redford. And we just had to learn to meet him in his fear, in his woundedness, in his withdrawnness. It just took us to another level. And I tell Redford's story, and I see people in the audience nodding. When I work with, managers doing some leadership coaching, they've got their own stories of cats and dogs and kids and the lessons they've learned. It's good stuff.
It's simple. It's so simple, but yet we as humans struggle so much to get to that level. Because see, the dog's not going to meet you because he's already hurt. He's already, he's already cowered in the corner. Like it's already a time for you to not try to stand over him and dictate. It's a time for you to show there's safety in this area, that you are safe, and that and see, I'm talking about this when you're dealing with an animal that's hurt, but just change the animal out to an employee that feels hurt, who's been hurt in anything, and talk about it in a sense of this is a safe place.
Yeah.
You're welcome to talk to me. I'm completely on your side. Let's
Yeah.
work through this. There you
Yeah.
go.
Yeah. Well, that lesson I've already mentioned a couple of times that Redford taught us, a proactive yes is always better than a reactive no. It came from him running out of our garage every time we opened a garage door, and he would just bolt into the neighborhood, and I would yell, no, Redford, stop. And I just realized, what I got to do is when I start pulling in the garage, I got to roll the window down. I got to open the door as quickly as I can and make it a love fest. Redford, I'm so happy to see you. And he wanted to learn to come to me. Well, I see you nodding your head, Mike. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I don't think I was ever really a great leader in the businesses my wife and I grew and then ultimately sold is I'm kind of a procrastinator, and good leaders get ahead of the curve so they can do that proactive planning and strategy and a proactive yes instead of having to do the last minute no. And so that's why I'm a student of leadership, not a leadership expert. I know that's the right answer. I still feel that at times.
Absolutely. Well, so let me find this little guy here because he's deciding to. I'm going to have Irvin grab him. He's decided he decided he wants to play with his little toy and be rambunctious real quick.
Well, and I think if I turn this, there's our most recent rescue. That's Lake right there. I'm working from the home office today. He's on our day bed in the den here.
He is living his best life right there too. That's just awesome.
And he was kind of a typical. We rescued him. He didn't come from a horrible environment, but somebody got him, and there was a divorce, and the mom got a puppy to make her feel better. They didn't know how to handle this dog. He lived in a crate in a girl's bedroom. He's a 75-pound field golden who needs to run a couple miles every day. And so when we got him, he was just bonkers, right? But we knew what he needed, and slowly over time, now he's a pretty chill dog because he goes to the park and chases the ball for, 45 minutes every day I'm in town.
And I love this guy. Her name's Bambi, and she can bite me all day and it doesn't hurt one bit. So it's one of the few puppies that you can okay, go ahead and nibble on me. It doesn't bother me one bit. Well, you get another puppy and you're like, oh, those are some sharp teeth. But
listeners, you better be careful. She might just bite that cable off of Mike's headset, and we'll have to go to Plan B real fast.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to go to the AirPods for sure.
Yeah.
I've caught her a couple times just like, oh, I'll nibble on that little plastic rope there. Yeah, you can see she's really, really having a good time right now. I think she got a nap. That's what happened. But there we go. Fun. Awesome. So here's let's take it from there because I think that's just really great industry insights, right? So the perspective that you bring to that. So why is there such a shortage of great leadership today? And this is my opinion, but it seems to resonate with other people that I talk to. It seems like, man, there really is in the industry something going on.
Yeah. I mean, I've got my theory. I think it's two or three things, Mike. I think one, we live in a world of celebrity influencers, and so people have been fed this social media lie that if I can get 10,000 followers, I'm a person of influence, and it's all about me. The camera's on me. I always look perfect. I'm perfectly groomed. So, I got my act together. And so that's kind of the model that people have in mind. And then secondly, Mike, I don't know if you and I had been podcasting in the 1950s. In some respects, I wonder, might we have been saying these very same questions because there was kind of the corporate man at that point that just had to go up the ladder and be a yes person. And so I think there's at some level always been a lack of leadership. John Dixon wrote a book a number of years ago called Humilitas. Humilitas is the Latin word for humility. And he's not an overly strong man of faith. I don't think so. At least I didn't get that reading in his book. But he made a pretty compelling case in his book that leadership was flipped upside down 2,000 years ago as Christianity began to spread. And instead of the leader being the overlord or the master, the leader was the servant. And that revolutionized the world. And John Dixon will go on to say again, not necessarily a strong call to faith in this book, but he will say much of what the Western civilization has accomplished in moving us into modern times is because of this upside down view of leadership. You're not the royalty that comes in on a stallion with 100 soldiers around you. you're the humble leader that comes in on a mule. And when leaders began doing that, public education grew, hospitals were set up, care for the poor and the neglected started happening, and the world got turned upside down. So I think it's a 2,000-year-old story, whether you're a follower of Christ or not. And so I would say my third reason. First reason, celebrity influencers. Second reason, I think it's always that way. But third reason, I think we in the West are beginning to live in kind of a post-Western world. And so I think we're losing some of that historical, cultural reality that created a platform for effective leadership.
Oh, I agree wholeheartedly. I think that's a big piece of it. The social aspect is an interesting one because I think, like you said, I think it puts a lot of influence in our lives, and gives us a false sense of reality. I mean, that's a big piece of it. And so, I don't know if everybody's strong enough to really figure this out yet, that everything they see on the internet is not real. But I think in time, what's the wonderful thing is AI is really kind of doing that for us, because now everything we look at, we start going, is that AI? Now I'm starting to question everything. Is it fake? Is it real?
Well, and the scary thing is, if you and I look pretty carefully, 99% of the time we can still figure out that image was AI generated. That person's not real. But I think in another 3 months to 3 years, there's going to be a younger, better looking Mike Turner, and we're going to think he's the real guy. And
this conversation really didn't ever happen. We won't know, other than the two people in this room, that it really did happen, and we really did have this conversation.
Yeah, I think you're right. And so, in some respects, I have hope and encouragement, because I think leadership as we emerge into the 2020s and beyond is going to need to be a smaller thing rather than a bigger thing. And, churches for the first 1,700 years were rarely larger than 120 people, right? They were
that's like the average size church nowadays.
Yeah. And today, the internet is full of the mega churches, and I don't have any problem with mega churches. My wife and I go to a very large church. They're doing wonderful things, but life change doesn't occur in rows. It occurs in circles. And so I think the type of leadership you and I are talking about, I really do believe it's got the opportunity for a kind of a renaissance as we move into the coming years, because people are going to want that real touch, that intimate gathering, that I see you connection in a world increasingly driven by media.
And I'll speak to this a little bit for my church, in my experience, but churches that do this, and it doesn't actually matter if it's a small church or a mega church, but the churches that actually do this very well, where they get you into the church, get you involved, get you part of a group, and then help guide and equip you and make you start to want to become a better leadership in your group. Like those are great. Like that, those opportunities where you can kind of start a Bible study, start a gym membership group. It doesn't matter what it is, just a common ground with whoever's around you, and you start that group, and then you start becoming a leader in that group. That's the best thing you can do for you spiritually and for people around you.
Well, and I appreciate what you just said, because you and I are talking about it in a church context. I will also say that in a marketplace context, the best place to learn leadership is to start leading. And humbly be willing to apologize as you screw things up at first, because you're going to make some bad mistakes. I remember the first employee that I was told to fire, and I fought for her job. This was many years ago, and I told my boss she needs another chance. Life is hard for her. She had really blown off a major assignment that impacted all of us, and it was kind of the final straw. I saved her job. I called her into my office to put her on plan. My boss said, all right, but you got to manage her very tightly, Andy. I want her on a performance improvement plan. You and I know what those are. So I came in to put her on plan. She quit right then and there, swore at me, swore at our company, walked out the door, left me dumbfounded. Here was the moral to my story. There's no good ending to this story other than when I walked out to meet the rest of my team, one of my team members, who is still a friend today, 20 years later, he said, well, it sure took you long enough. He thought I'd finally fired her because they all knew she needed to go. I was the one that was trying to be the nice boss.
Right.
The only way I learned that is because I made a big mistake, right? You got to do it right. And so I think part of becoming a high achieving leader is kind of eating crow regularly as you make mistakes, and then not making the same mistake over and over and over and over and over again, learning from your mistakes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I would even add that, and I made this mistake early in my leadership journey as a manager and whatnot. I wasn't holding the employees accountable. In a lot of ways, I was like giving them too much leadway, not saying, "Hey, we have a deadline to meet. You didn't meet it. Why didn't you meet it?"
Yeah.
It might open up a conversation of there's stuff going on, but you got to hold them accountable, because in the end, when you hold them accountable and an employee is held accountable, they surprise you and actually exceed those metrics that you put in front of them.
Push them. Yeah.
And 9 times out of 10, they exceed them. So.
Yeah. A friend of mine was just sharing with me yesterday, his boss left. He is now reporting directly to his boss's boss. He said, "Andy, I barely know him. I already love him because he's made it very clear to everybody on my team. He is fully accessible to us at any time.
Right.
And when we come to him, what's the clear business issue? What direction are we taking? What advice do we need from him? How do we move forward together?"
Yep.
I thought, man, that's a good communicator saying, man, my door's open.
Yeah.
And don't just drop by and chit chat. Let me help you grow in your responsibilities.
Yeah. And I would even add, I told this to my staff all the time when I'm leading the team. Look, your time is valuable. My time is valuable. When you come in, just bring a solution with you. Yeah. And also let me know if you have a blocker. So if you have a blocker and you have a solution, just bring that to me. Take my 5 minutes, take the 15 minutes. Let's work through it. Don't ever think that I'm too busy to have a conversation like that with you.
No. Well, and you saying that blocker, I mean, part of what, as I talk about, I've got these 4 leadership necessities you asked me about earlier in our pre-conversation. One of them includes the idea of leader as champion, where some of these blocks that are in your way, you can't take care of. I've got to fight your fight for you. I've got to go to our corporate policies and let people know this is impeding your performance. I've got to have a hard conversation with my boss. I've got to step in with you to that customer conversation because it's gone far enough now. So part of the job of a leader, you and I laughed about this. Part of the job of a leader is we're the ones that get all the hard conversations. If you're a manager, you get easy conversations. If you're a leader, those hard conversations kind of boil up to you. In fact, I will even say, one of the defining characteristics, if you want to walk into an organization and know who the real leaders are, figure out who are the people that people take problems to. Yep. Who are the people that get the challenging things put on their desk? Yep. That's probably somebody.
That's your leadership.
Good leadership. Good leadership fodder. Yeah.
Love it. All right. So we're at that point where I like to throw out a couple rapid fire questions for you. I think it helps us resonate with a few things and make sure we didn't miss anything. So I'll throw out some of those for you.
All right.
So what habit changed your life?
Well, you and I shared, I've gotten into fitness in the last 6 years. I used to be a strength and conditioning coach at the high school level, but then went away from that for many years. So I have to say CrossFit changed my life. I lost 30 pounds. I'm stronger than I've been in years. And then for me, I call it the leader's hour. It's not a full 60 minutes, but this morning was one of those days where I got to start my day with prayer and reflection and kind of slowing my heart rate down, thinking about the upcoming day. How did I want to partner with God in the work that he wanted me to do? I wish I could say I have a leader's hour successfully every morning. Life is complicated and gym time and dogs and client responsibilities. But when I can follow that habit of the leader's hour on a consistent basis, I end up being more effective. So fitness and the leader's hour is really 2 answers. Sorry about that.
No, that's great. I love that. So what book has influenced your thinking the most?
Well, obviously you and I are both people of faith. So regular time in the Bible and all of the models and leadership lessons in there. I mentioned Humilitas by John Dixon. That was really formative in my thinking because I recognize this isn't just a nice Christian story. This is a world-changing revolution when leadership gets turned upside down. And then another book, probably more than 20 years old at this point, is called The Power Principle by Blaine Lee. Blaine is a colleague of Stephen Covey. We all recognize Stephen Covey in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Blaine Lee was one of his colleagues. And that book was really about the power of the powerlessness and how influence is really power in disguise. So those would be a couple of books that were really formative for me a number of years ago. Thirdly, I would mention The Work of Leaders by Juliet Straw. And really, it's a compilation. It's a research study around leadership effectiveness, heavily researched in the marketplace, what makes leaders effective leaders. And they found several common characteristics in their heavily researched study.
I'm going to have just a podcast on just all these,
Yeah.
just all these great writings of people that kind of see what we see in leaders.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's one leadership principle you come back to again and again?
You'll never be a better leader than you are a person. Leadership always starts with you. Hold the mirror up, lead yourself well.
Oh, I love that. Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
And what advice do you give most often?
Well, I think it would probably tie back into that and what you and I talked about earlier in this social media driven world. I think I work with a lot of young and emerging leaders, and they just have to learn you're not allowed to make it about you. The whole world is telling you you're supposed to make it about you. Get your Instagram up, get your LinkedIn posts going out 3 times a week, yada, yada, yada. Leader, don't make it about you.
The stuff that it's about the team, it's about the person, it's about the path.
Yeah.
There's just so many things it's about, but you are not
That's
the
exactly
center of it.
Yeah. It's if leaders really understand leadership, they're the bottom of the pyramid. They're not the top of the pyramid. That's a hard lesson to learn in the 2020s, I think.
All right, last question. So what's one thing leaders should stop doing immediately?
What's one thing leaders should stop
doing immediately?
Thinking that being the boss is a privilege rather than a responsibility.
Yeah, don't if you're trying to be a boss because of the pay or because of the notoriety, you're probably doing it wrong already.
Yeah, great insight. That's exactly right. So you got to step back from that to go back to recapture some of these Western world cultural realities about humble leadership. Yeah.
So if someone's listening and feels stuck in their career or leadership journey, what's the first step they should take?
So I think probably they need to do some self-reflection. You and I've already talked about this. I said, hold up the mirror. There's some online self-assessment tools they can get, the DISC tool, the Strengths Finder tool, things like that to help them hold up the mirror. I have a friend who is a hairstylist, and she and I were talking a number of months ago. She said, the problem for hairstylists is we live in rooms that are full of mirrors. We look at ourselves all day long. Andy, I want you to look at yourself, but just briefly, right? We got to make sure the haircut's good. Mirrors are for glancing. They're not for gazing. So I think leaders need to hold up mirrors, briefly and think about yourself and figure out what your strengths are and figure out what your, areas for improvement are and create environments to the best of your ability where your strengths are maximized and your weaknesses don't impact the negatively the organization you're serving. I am a procrastinator who can really handle pressure very well. At the last minute, if you need somebody to perform, I'm your man. If you need me to think through a 3-week strategic plan and lay out 17 steps along the way, I'm not great at that. So I've got to put people around me that are really good at this. And then I have to pretend, hey, that mark 3 weeks ago was that day's urgent mark to get me to this urgent thing. And, I've worked with a woman who is kind of wired exactly the opposite. She's always, everything is an A. Everything is an A. Everything's got to be done right now. And for her, part of it is recognizing, man, you need to prioritize some things. You're burning yourself out because there's no priority to your list of to-do items.
Ah, yes.
Yeah.
Dr. Andy Neillie, where can people connect with you?
Well, Neillie Leadership, and the bad news about my name is it's just spelled a little bit challenging, Neillie. But if they go to neillieleadership.com, they'll find me. I've even got a link at the top of my website. If somebody wants to just grab 15 minutes on the phone to talk about specific leadership challenges, I'm always up for that. The other thing, I'm not sure you and I talked about this ahead of time. My business coach, the Mike Turner in my corner a number of years ago, told me, Andy, you need to capture some of your voice and have it available as an offering. So I have a 8-page ebook called The 3 Imperative Leadership Conversations. And Mike, it's available at leadershipmaterials.com. Somebody can just download that 8-page ebook on the 3 Imperative Leadership Conversations. So leadershipmaterials.com neillieleadership.com.
Perfect. Let's make sure we get those in the show notes. That'll be awesome for everyone to have as well. You were an awesome guest. I really appreciate you having on the show. And good luck to you, and then Godspeed.
Thanks, Mike. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to I'm Up, He Sees Me, I'm Down. Follow the show for more conversations on leadership, faith, and resilience. Sponsored by Alamo Tech and Mission Solution Partners.